All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. It's episode 106 of Keeping It Rio. And today I'm extremely excited. I've got a special guest here, Mr. Dan Nicholson. Dan, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. This is actually the first time you and I have met, which is kind of my favorite thing to do with this podcast. I love to meet people with unique stories, and I love not knowing anything about them before we start. So, um, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you coming at us from today?
Yeah, well, I'm sort of was the cliche kid growing up scheming on business ideas, um, mostly bad business ideas.
It
parents,
happens.
parents, son of a machinist and a lunch lady. So I come from humble roots, and while I've gone on and gotten some degrees and stuff, I still kind of consider myself a bit of a blue collar guy. Just from my background and the values that I have growing up. But ultimately, I'm on a kind of a mission to end or reduce the amount of suffering that I see small business owners go through, because we're so subject to all this scrutiny and expectations, and there's so many false narratives about what it really takes to be successful or get the outcomes that you want. And so I'm kind of on this mission to share what I've learned, and more so what I've had to unlearn to grow businesses that serve me, because I believe that businesses exist to serve us. Maybe you're doing some venture back thing where you've got a bunch of shareholders, but that's not most of us. That's a very small percentage. Most of us, we started something because we wanted freedom and maybe legacy. And so these businesses, again, need to serve us, and oftentimes it's the reverse. We're serving the business.
Boy, that's a true statement. I can tell you that. I've been in the roofing industry for 25 years, and it's been me serving the industry for a while. So I can appreciate that mindset, and I think that's something that's extremely valuable. And I think a lot of my audience will appreciate that, because most of them are small business owners as well. So this is going to be awesome. You mentioned, coming from humble beginnings, growing up as a kid, you dreamt of entrepreneurial things, which is amazing. At what point in your life did you actually jump out and say, "Hey, I'm gonna do a lemonade stand, or I'm gonna, cut lawns, or do whatever I do"? What was your very first entrepreneurial
I think
experience
it
for you?
was 7 or 8 that my sister and I started manufacturing these Christmas ornaments, where we would my dad, because he was a machinist, he would build these tools for us so we could uh, use a drill press and put some holes in these cups that we then hot glued into this kind of sphere that we fished all these lights into. And so I was 7, my sister was 9.5. We started manufacturing those. I was always the business person between us, like funding the operations, and to some degree like scheming. My sister's more of the artistic touch to things. So pretty early on, we would sell, I don't even know, it seemed like a lot at the time for us, 20 to 30 of those initially, and then it became like 30 to 50 per like holiday season, and it just kind of like kept leveling up a little bit. And as like a 7 or 8 year old, we thought we were Scrooge McDucking it at that point.
Right, just dumping into the giant vat of money, right?
Yeah,
That's tremendous.
This just dates me. This just to give you an idea that I'm obviously in my 40s. That then I ran the numbers. I'm kind of a math person, and like started thinking about all this money I thought I could make from a paper route. Of course, that sounds silly now, and who actually has a paper route? But my parents said, "Okay, when you're 13, you can have a paper route." And so as soon as I got close to 13, I was like, "Hey, you guys told me 4 years ago when I got to this point I could have a paper route." And I did run it like it was my first legitimate business. Like I was thinking about how can I get more folks on my my route, and ultimately I made more money in December than the rest of the year because of all the tips that I would get from, which was somewhat unexpected, but because I was running it like a business, with the whole like holiday cards that I'd manufacture and all this sort of stuff, I had some pretty like grateful folks on my route.
That's awesome. So at a very young age, you understood the concept of building relationships and standing out in a crowd. And I can imagine a 13-year-old, putting together a nice thank you package or card and sending it over. And that had to be very impactful on your prospects and your customers. So from a very young age, you've been exceeding expectations, I guess you could say.
Hustling. I was definitely hustling then. I've had to kind of learn some of the dangers of always defaulting to hustling, but I was definitely hustling then.
There are some dangers, but sometimes some of the most fun adventures are the dangerous ones. So I can't say that I've quite learned how to harness all that myself. But we have a good time. That's what's really important, right?
My mentor always says to me, you'd rather have to take some out than have to put some in. So
that's it. I always tell people I'd rather have to pull back on the reins and have to crack the whip. And that just applies in every aspect of life. So that's pretty amazing. Continuing on down the road, obviously, you've gotten the paper route, you've got the Christmas lights going on. These are all really cool, things that we don't really see kids doing nowadays, unfortunately. What was it like? Because I was kind of similar. Okay. When I was a young man, my parents had a grocery store, and I was the kid who literally would go in and I'd buy a 12-pack of sodas for back then, $3 or whatever it was. And I'd go to the park across the street and I'd sell them for 35 cents a can, which was below what my mom and dad were selling it for, but I was making $4 or $5 per thing. And it just started from that, and I remember when I was growing up as a young man, going through high school and such, that I would go work with my family after school and such. And I was making a pretty good living. Honestly, it was one of those deals where the people thought I was a spoiled kid, but in reality, I was working like 60 hours a week with school and that. Yeah. And, I can certainly appreciate it. There were times in my life where, I'd work every single day during the summer, and then I'd go spend my $5,000 that I made at the age of 14 or 15 on, the nicest things. And everybody didn't understand how that worked, but it was kind of cool.
Understand how that works.
Most of them still don't, and a lot of those kids were still, they were playing during the summer when I was doing my deal, and they're probably playing right now. But it's very important to have that work ethic. You said coming from a blue collar family, obviously it was impressed upon you early by your parents. Hard day's work is a good day, and you can make an honest living out there and support your family. Growing up, how big is your family? You said you have a sister's family of 4 or?
Family of 4. And for the most part, that's our family. I mean, I have, of course, some aunts and uncles and grandparents, but my parents had, let's just say, less than desirable childhoods. And so for the most part, they
just broke free,
distanced themselves a fair amount from what they went through. And to a large degree, like, I didn't know until I was a grown man, I guess, what they actually went through. And so I have a lot of pride in my parents giving me a different life and sort of stopping the paradigm of sorts, right? And giving me a chance to, and my sister a chance to not kind of carry that, I'll call it, baggage onto, our kids. And so, how it perpetuates generation after generation. They stopped it on their side.
That's amazing. And I love hearing things like that because, somebody has to stand up and stop it. And, the fact that you're able to have a great life because your parents understood, we don't want this kind of stuff to continue, speaks volumes. So you've got the family, you guys are, entrepreneurial, you're out there making money. At what point do you decide, okay, let's go to something, really big? What was your first impossible dream that you're able to accomplish?
Well, I finish high school. I go off to college. First person in my family to go to college, and I have this kind of internal conflict of sorts at this point, because I'm really entrepreneurial, but I'm also pretty shy. My parents would describe me as a kid as painfully shy. Like there's at least 3 painfullies that they get in there. And so I had a speech problem, I had really bad teeth, just some things that make you, and my parents were shy
Self-conscious.
as well. So I go off to college, and I always did well in school, but I didn't necessarily have the confidence that I do now. And so I start, and by the end of the freshman year, it's like, I'm top of my class, and like, I wasn't necessarily thinking I was going to be like a 4.0 student and get in college and get all this recognition. And I mentioned that because my confidence just skyrocketed. And I got this email from the business school about UPS, the big shipping company, how they had jobs with scholarship opportunities. And like, I'm living at home, commuter student, driving in to make this work, make it financially work for me and my family. And so the numbers that they're listing on this email, I got to go to this. This weekend kind of career fair that they have going on. And they've listed, at the time I'm a marketing major, and they listed all these kind of white collar jobs, marketing, etc. I go there, and I'm 19, and I sit through like 30 minutes of presentation, and it's basically talking through all the jobs as working in a hub, being a sorter, loading, unloading, etc. And I've got all these resumes and cover letters printed off, and I'm like in a suit, all the stuff I just learned in my business communications class. I stand out like a sore thumb. We get to the end, I raise my hand, and I'm like, hey, like, this is all cool, but like, I got this print off here that says there's like marketing internships and stuff. Like, where do I go for that? I'm not sure if I'm in the right place. I'm like, well, we don't know anything about these marketing roles or anything other than we got 2 guys from the finance department who were outside, and you can go chat with them. I go out there, and long story long, 2 weeks later, I get a job as a finance supervisor managing a team of 20 to 25 folks, completely autonomous. I'm doing all the hiring, firing. I'm working inside the hub itself, but my team is basically auditing these shippers to make sure that they've been billing themselves correctly. I'm the youngest guy. Everyone on my team is older than me. My lead is in his late 40s, and that changed the entire trajectory of my college life, my profession, my confidence, et cetera, et cetera. It still doesn't make sense when I explain it to people and we get into the details. Like, how did you get this? 19, you hadn't even taken a finance class yet.
Some things just don't make sense, Dan, and that's perfectly fine, right? That's the beauty of this world, that a 19-year-old can go into UPS sticking out like a sore thumb wearing a suit when everybody else is, wondering what they're going to be throwing into the back of the truck. And that's insane, really. That's an amazing accomplishment. Let me ask you this. When you're a 19-year-old running an entire team, most of the time people are going to respect you, I think. But I was also, when I was 16, I used to be a manager of some people that were much older than me as well. And there was a lot of resentment. I'm not going to lie. People were very unhappy about the fact that their boss was younger than their children and things like that, which, I didn't really think in those terms. I was just always trying to be the best I could be. And it just happened to work out that way. But what about you working at a national corporation with a whole bunch of people? You just said, one of the guys that's one of your main people is 3 times your age or double your age at least. What what was that experience like for you? Communication and just, getting the respect that someone of that stature deserves.
Yeah, and just to add to the challenge is that inside a UPS hub, and this was the main hub in Seattle. I was going to college in Seattle. I live in Seattle still, Seattle area. The whole it's a union shop, right? All the drivers, loaders, unloaders, like everyone is union inside the hub. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of union workers at a hub the size of one in Seattle or any of the large cities. My entire team were non-union. So like 25 guys working in here, we're the only non-union folks in a sea of, and we're trying to collaborate with them. And so it was pretty, this is where I'm grateful to have grown up the way that I did with sort of that blue collar background, where it's like, yeah, I can talk the academic talk, but really this is just meeting people at their individual point of need and just talking to them like another human. Like, hey, we're just two people trying to get a job done, right? I'm not here to make your life worse. I'm actually here to make your life easier. Like, how do we collaborate? I'm not going to pretend like I have all the answers. I don't. But I'm also not going to be pushed around. So if you think you're going to be disrespectful to me or my team, like that's not going to happen. But so I'm going to stand up for myself. But at the same point, that's not even necessary because unless you want to take it to that point, I'm not going to take it to that point. But if you want to, absolutely, I'll back my team. But that's going to have to be your choice.
I love that. That's tremendous. Really, just that's absolute leadership at the highest level from a 19-year-old. That's tremendous. I'm sorry for breaking in there, but yeah,
no, going. I appreciate that. It still seems surreal. I don't know where that came from because, like I said, like a year prior, I was still this painfully shy kid going into college, living at home, commuting, feeling like I kind of stick out in the beginning because I'm not living on campus. And then something happened over that course of a year. And this is what I tell the people that I mentor and in my various businesses at this point is that when you make a decision, when you pick a shoulder and attack, I'm a basketball guy too, pick a shoulder and attack, your whole trajectory of your life can change. Right. And so we talk about, I have this certification program called Certified Certainty Advisor. And we talk about tank versus trunk. You have an option to either take what's happened in the past and put it in your trunk and drag it around as baggage for the rest of your life. It's going to slow you down for sure. Or you can put it in your tank and use it as fuel to that you burn to propel you forward. And so it should be obvious. We want to choose the option that's the tank. Unfortunately, and I think we all know this, most of us put it not in the tank, we put it in the trunk.
Without any hesitation, we put it in the trunk, that's for sure. And that's hitting me hard right now because my life as it is has been one of those recent experiences have led me to kind of change the direction I'm going in. And it was just basically, hey, I just don't want to, like you said, continue to drag that trunk around with me. I'm just going to let it go. I rip the rear view mirror off is what I tell people. And I put a brick on the gas pedal and we're going straight. So I can definitely appreciate this. This is a great interview. I'm having a great time with this. So thank you. Yeah, continue on. And I've got some good questions later for you too, but I'm really enjoying this.
Yeah. So I get this job at UPS and I'm working 30 hours a week or so. It's an evening job. So it's like 5 to 11, basically ish, 4 to 10. And somewhere along the way, like I said, it was a marketing major, and somewhere along the way, it's like I was doing well in accounting classes, and the accounting department took me out to lunch and made this whole pitch on why I should move to being an accounting major. And that wasn't something that was on my radar necessarily, but they made this pitch about how there's a staggering percentage of Fortune 500 company CEOs who have accounting degrees. And their point was sort of like, accounting is the language of business. So if you understand the numbers, you're always going to be in the driver's seat because most of the business leaders don't want to ever look at the numbers. So eventually shifted to accounting and then double majored in information systems, thinking, okay, technology, accounting, that's going to be the best skill set to be an entrepreneur. And then my career went in the exact opposite direction of being an entrepreneur, and which is I signed on to do some consulting at the big one of the big global firms, Deloitte, and and then the school that I was going to nominated me to do this fellowship at the board that writes all the accounting standards in the U.S.
Wow.
Sort of the equivalent of the accounting world. It'd be the equivalent of clerking for the Supreme Court. And so I end up getting this fellowship. I move across the country to Connecticut, and it was another fish out of water moment for me. There were 7 of us in the program, and I show up in like my Honda Civic that I drove across the country. The other 6, and the program that I went to was at the time and I didn't even know it, like it ranked 20th in the country in accounting. But the other 6 were like, went to the number 1, the number 2, the number 3, the number 4. And their dad was like the top cardiologist in the US. And one of them was like CFO of the second biggest insurance company in the world. And you like going down the list of and they got like Audis when they graduated from college. And I'm like, yeah, that's cool. Like I lived at home and like my dad's a machinist, and like that's that trust fund account. That's pretty cool. Strangely though, I ended up getting put on the most, and this has been like a pattern to some extent in my life. I end up on arguably the most complicated standard. This section called derivatives and hedging. Basically, if you're familiar with hedge funds and just sort of the whole finance world. And so that put my career on this different trajectory for a number of years, where I was sort of this derivatives, hedging, treasury capital markets expert, working for mostly Fortune 5 companies that had $100 to $200 billion in investable assets, and a Warren Buffett backed company getting ready to go public, and a few different things. But I was miserable the whole time, absolutely miserable. And I didn't know how to reconcile that, because I felt kind of like ungrateful. It's like, here I am, making more than my parents have ever made, and I'm working less than my dad, who's still working 6 days a week, up at 2:30 in the morning, and I'm completely unsatisfied with this work that I'm doing. And so, long story long, sorry for all the details, but long story long, I finally realized, like, well, that's because I'm playing somebody else's game. I'm doing this corporate thing, and I'm not meant to do this corporate thing. Like, I can do it. I can do the work. I can do the work at a high level. But I don't want to be in meetings about future meetings when maybe we might talk about something or do something. And so that's when I finally went all in on being an entrepreneur. And the only way I could give myself permission to do it was to lean into what I already knew was a strength. And so the first full-time business I started was a CPA firm, still exists, called Nth Degree CPAs. And I thought, okay, well, maybe I'm pretty good at this, and we can do something different. And that was 15 years ago, and that was the start of me having to unlearn everything I learned from college and working in corporate America.
Wow, that's incredible. I mean, just winding roads and all kinds of overcoming major obstacles in rooms that you probably, in your own mind at least, shouldn't have even been in. But one thing I want to say is I completely admire your stand there, because I recently did the exact same thing. We've had a roofing company here in San Antonio, Texas. We bought it 4 years ago, myself and a couple friends. And the other day I decided I didn't want to do it anymore. And it was kind of tough, because I spent 4 years of my life I've put into it, but I'm the same way you are. I realized a couple years ago that I never dreamt of owning a roofing company. I like helping people. I like teaching. But I was just kind of hanging out and doing my thing. And then I came to realize it's really not any of our dreams. So it's nobody's going to be upset when you say, hey, this isn't doing it for me anymore. I want to do something different. It takes a lot of courage to stand up and do that. And I totally understand what you mean when people say, man, you own a roofing business, you've got multiple locations, you've got great partners, you get to go and do all kinds of cool events and have fun. And I'm sitting over here thinking, man, I do not have any fire in my heart. I have no passion right now. And once you lose that, there's no amount of money that can make you feel right. It's much more than money in this world. So kudos to you for taking the stand. Tell me what happens from that point.
Well, I have a couple things that I just reacting to what you just shared that come to mind right away, and I appreciate sharing that. Which is, we start a business. I talk about these two tyrants of leadership. I learned this from my mentor, Randy Massingill. Two tyrants: scrutiny and expectation. So I imagine when you bought this roofing business, you had a bunch of people who were like, "What are you doing? Are you sure you know? You sure this is going to be successful? You already got this other thing that, successful career, whatever it was." So you get all this scrutiny. And then a couple of years later, you sell, or you want to get out, and then people have all these expectations, like, wow, how could you do that? Like, look at all these locations you have, and so on and so forth. You're like, hold on,
yeah, where were
you
you
the
at?
same people who were scrutinizing me 3 or 4 years ago. And so that scrutiny, and we call them the two tyrants of leadership: scrutiny and expectations. If you're not aware that those exist and you have the right support system and mental models and things in place, you end up being very exploitable, because you're in so much pain from all the scrutiny and expectations from the outside world, and then all the shame and guilt that maybe you might experience about what should I be doing? Oh, I should have known better, on and on and on. That then we become exploitable. And what I mean by that is tempted to take quick actions to try and prove other people wrong, or to prove to ourselves what we're actually capable of doing. And so we got to be really aware of that. So I just want to share that. And then the second thing that came to mind, part of our, especially in Western culture, part of our identity is we have this belief where I do what I say I'm going to do. That's a big part of like how I was raised, and we do what we say we're going to do. The problem when it's framed that way, though, is that you're constantly violating your own principle, and that can attack your psyche. And let me explain, if it's okay, what I mean by that.
Absolutely.
So, Chuck, if you and I met up for lunch, which hopefully someday we do that, meet up for lunch, and it's like, hey, I don't know a great place in San Antonio, but whatever your favorite, barbecue place is, we're going to go there, and let's meet tomorrow for lunch at 1. You get there before me because you're early, and the restaurant's on fire. You obviously don't go sit down and wait for me. All right.
I would hope not.
Go somewhere else.
I might wait somewhere else from you. I'm not going to sit in the kitchen and wait for you there. No, certainly not.
The building is on fire, right? You're going to go somewhere else. And if I got there, I'm not going to be pissed off at you like, hey, where's Chuck? Why isn't he sitting here? So clearly there's exceptions to we do what we say we're going to do. Now that's an extreme, but I like to test our thought patterns in the extremes, because if they don't hold up in the extremes, then are they really the right principles and really the right belief systems? And so clearly when something is on fire, in a literal sense, we reserve the right to change our mind. So many business owners have things that are not literally on fire, but they're figuratively on fire, but they keep doing them because they said they would. And so in relationships that they continue to be in because they made a commitment to it, even though it's on fire figuratively. And so that's where I come to a better definition, a better belief set, which is discipline. A definition that I use for discipline, which is, would you be a disciple of yourself? Discipline is, would you be a disciple of yourself? If I'm following you around every day, with a camera and you watch it back, would that be someone you want to follow? And so someone that you'd want to follow, they reserve the right to change their mind, and they have the integrity to tell other people about it, which is exactly what you did, right? You've got new information. Like, I thought this was going to be the thing for me. Now I've lived it. It no longer serves me. I reserve the right to change my mind. I have to have the integrity to go back and tell my partners what's changed and not abandon them, but come up with a plan that's beneficial to everyone. And so that's a sort of a long winding like anecdote to come around to making sure that the mental models and the way we're thinking about things actually hold up, and not just continuing to operate on these beliefs that aren't actually getting you closer to what you really want.
That's powerful right there. And boy, that, like I said, that really hits home. I appreciate that perspective because I agree 100%. Wow, that really did. So yeah, tremendous. You kind of got me flustered a little bit. I started thinking about that as you were talking. I was like, man, this guy's talking right to me as this is happening in my world. But you're right. You have to be able at some point, and it was excruciating to have to decide, this is something I thought I really wanted. But over the course of the 4 years, I've grown so much because of the company that I found myself surrounded with. And I've leveled up probably 20 levels in the last 4 years. And now I look back and I say, well, that guy there, of course, that was perfect for him at that time. But now the new version of me is no longer interested in that and wants to do something completely different that's going to serve a greater purpose than, just making money for myself and helping the families that I work with and the people that work for me. But I think, it really does. And a lot of people in life are very, very sad because they just don't. I don't think it's courage. I think a lot of it is, you're going to be frowned upon by society. You're like you said, people are going to look at you and they're going to say, what's wrong with you?
No matter what. So you got scrutiny and expectations when you started the business. And then when you end it, people are like, how could you possibly do this? Now they're indignant. How could you possibly do this? Like, remember when you thought this was a bad idea?
Yeah, right. And it's crazy because you see the evolution and you realize, okay, it flips for both sides there, which is really a cool concept.
Game. It's an infinite game. So what we think we want today is going to be different 4 years from now. Maybe 2 days from now, if we're not making decisions when we're in a space of mental sobriety, then tomorrow or 2 hours from now, what we think we wanted is going to be different. I choose to accept that as the reality and build systems and processes that account for that. The fact that we're biased as humans, it's hardwired into our DNA. Dopamine is the molecule of more. And so we're constantly chasing more stuff. And that's just part of who we are. And many of us want to throw stones at other people. Like, I'm not biased, but you're biased. The people who think that, they're the most exploitable.
Absolutely.
Because they don't even realize that it's just part of who we are.
That's brilliant. I'm not going to lie. That Trey said you're a genius, and he's absolutely correct. You've really got a wonderful way of explaining and putting things out there. I'm really appreciating this a lot. So we'll continue on down the path. Obviously, you've changed everything. You realize, okay, all the stuff that I had been doing, now I have to completely switch mindsets because it went from a corporate mentality to now, 100%. It's a sink or swim mindset. It's go out and as primal as this sounds, it's kill your dinner. If you don't go out there and get it, you're not going to get it. So how does that transformation start for you? And during that process, what kind of troubles did you run into mentally? And, there's got to be self-doubt every step of the way.
Yeah. So when I finally started about 15 years ago, full time, my whole mental models were just like, I'm just going to outwork everyone else. That's really what had served me up to that point, was just, I'm going to study more. I'm going to ask better questions. I'm going to put in maximum effort because that's how I got the grades and the jobs, and at least that's what I believed was true. And unfortunately, that is not necessarily what causes you to be successful. I had to learn this the hard way. Never had any problems getting clients, but I had challenges developing a team, and it's like 2 steps forward, almost 2 steps back. And I kept asking, like, what my default is to always go to, like, I'm doing something wrong. Like, I'm the reason why this isn't working out. Like, what do I need to do? What do I need to do differently? And so I started seeking out some counseling and coaching, and like, what am I missing? And it came to a head when I bought another business. It was a smaller CPA firm, and it was a total disaster. Total disaster. I mean, the promises that the guy made that sold us the practice, it was like he was working in opposition to us once the deal closed. And 9 months in, I'm so miserable and spiraling. I'm like, maybe I just need to like sell all this and just like go get a job. Maybe I'm not cut out for it. And that's when I hired my mentor, Randy Massengale, that I've worked with for 7-8 years now at this point. Introduced to me by a friend, and that friend was like, talk to Randy. He's unconventional. I can't really describe him to you. Just meet him. And that was very alluring to me because I'd always positioned myself as like the unconventional accountant. And so I sit down with Randy, and I've met with 2 other business coaches in the same week up to this point. And I sit down, and it's like a bizarre conversation because he's not asking me anything about business strategy. And by the way, Randy was a senior advisor to Bill Gates and several other wildly successful now billionaires, right? So very accomplished guy himself. But he's asking me about my kids and my wife, and he's telling me about his kids and his wife, and he's talking to me a lot about basketball. He was a college basketball player. Basketball was a big part of my identity growing up, and we spent like half of the time just talking about basketball. And I'm just confused. And it's like, we haven't talked at all about these business problems that I have. And we get to the end of it, and he's like, Dan, here's your problem. You're not playing your game. You're playing someone else's game. Like, okay, what does that mean? It's like, well, and then he proceeded to break it down in a way that's like, no one has ever understood me better than you just did, and we talked for 45 minutes. He has this whole idea that well, first off, his whole bias is you play to your strengths, you don't play to your weaknesses, and that if you want to figure out your game, you look to your favorite sport or hobby growing up and how you showed up in those moments. And so he makes his argument that's like, typically ignoring certain socioeconomic situations or overbearing parents where you just don't get to choose what sports you play or how you show up. It's like, in your favorite sport or hobby, it's usually your freest expression of who you are. Like, you get to decide how aggressive you are on the field or court, or maybe you don't even want to be on a team sport. You want to be on an independent sport or an independent hobby. And so I found that to be unbelievably true. When I've interviewed other people, I often talk to them about their favorite sport or hobby, and I can glean so much about how they're actually going to be as a colleague. And so my game was, I'm 6'2", so on most teams I was always like the tall kid. But as far as like elite basketball goes, like 6'2" is nothing to, you're the short guy. So in most team sports, because I was not elite enough to play at the big time level. I was the guy under the hoop. But in pickup games, when I could actually play the way I wanted to, I wanted to be the shooting guard. And I'm not the most athletically gifted, but so I was sort of a hustle, dive on the floor, get after it, no regrets. But I'm always willing to take the last shot. I want the ball in my hands, and that's how I am in business. Is I want to take the last shot. I'm going to dive on. I'm going to hustle. That's going to be my default. But again, I want the ball in my hands. And so when I'm letting other people dictate the speed of the game, the business, the overall decision, because I'm just trying to have consensus because that's what we were told we're supposed to do, then I'm playing someone else's game and I'm unhappy and I'm kind of checked out. I don't actually know how to be a leader. And so that moment changed, again, this massive inflection point in me moving away from trying to be just someone that I'm not, that I thought I had to be because that's what I learned in business school and in corporate America.
Yep. And that's, I mean, such a valuable lesson. So many people never get to that point where they realize, hey, look, this just isn't it for me. And, our days are finite. We don't have, what we sometimes feel like we have, which is, I'll do it tomorrow or I'll do it whenever. I'll get to it eventually. Eventually sometimes never shows up, and I know people that have overcome debilitating illnesses and then die in a car accident, and it's just like, okay, take everything for what it is, but also understand that, 50 years from now, the chances of us both still being on this planet are probably not super great just based on averages, so
Sure. Yeah.
I'm 44, and if I make it double this, okay, great. But I look backward and I'm like, oh man, yesterday I was looking at something and I'm listening to this 90s channel on my radio in the car, and the song was from 93. And they're like, the number one hit from 30 years ago. And I thought, what?
Yeah.
Like, how did that happen? I thought 93 was like a week or two ago, and then I start looking around, I'm getting a little gray, and it's like, oh, whoa, this is going a lot faster than what we think it's going to go. And when we're younger, we always take that for granted. And I think as we continue to grow, it becomes more obvious that, okay, taking action is going to be what's going to get us to where I'm going. There's still a lot of people that they'd never break out of that shell, and they live their entire life in that bubble of get up, go to work. I think the old adage was, my boss pulled up in his brand new sports car and told me, if you work extra hard next year, I could get another one, thank you. Yeah. And there's a lot to that, but being able to take that plunge is something that just separates the winners from the losers, I think, in this world. And, you've done it several times. You've relocated cross country and all that. Fairly obvious that, success is not something that comes easy, even though to a lot of people, maybe it does.
We have this okay. So I'm glad you just said what you did, because I have a lot of thoughts on it. And it is the underpinning of my book called Rigging the Game. People hear the title and they think he's going to tell me how to do some unethical things, but really it's about how do we engineer the outcome that we want, engineer luck. And there's this quote, every system is perfectly designed for the results it gets. And it's actually fairly profound when you think about it. It's like, okay, if I don't like the results, I can be a victim. Well, that's what many of us are doing, and just poor me. Or I can try and change the system. That's hard. Probably can't do that most times. Or I can just change my behavior within that system so that I get the outcome that I want. And that's really what I teach people how to do. Understand the system, reverse engineer it so that you get the outcomes that you want. In pursuit of that, I really started studying, why is it that some people win and other people lose? And there's two extreme narratives. There's the go all in, bet on yourself, take all the risks. You're never going to be successful unless you bet on yourself. And then there's the other perspective, which is got to have a plan, fail to plan to fail, do all the research, etc. two kind of extreme examples, right? And you look at those and you go, well, I know some people who did all the research and they still can't run a successful business. That was me for a long time, right? Then I know the other people who go all in, bet on themselves. Sometimes they get results. Sometimes they blow themselves up. So which one is accurate? And it turns out that those are just really good narratives based off what you're trying to sell. So if I see someone in a lot of pain and I sell them on this idea, you got to go in and bet on yourself, like I might be able to make a really quick sale. Or someone who's doing all the research, right? I show them a detailed plan. That's what they wanted. They're going to buy that. Right? So they're really good sales techniques. But actually, when you study the truly successful entrepreneurs, again, in the extremes, and I write about this in detail in my book, they're playing their game. So Elon Musk, he was a weirdo before he was an eccentric billionaire. Bill Gates, he was a weirdo before he was an eccentric billionaire. Go down the list, right? They got success because they weren't trying to be someone that they're not. And you could pick whatever billionaire, and to challenge you to find someone who was trying to be someone they're not. They have a toolkit for decision making. You may not like that. You know, Elon Musk in particular, right now, like he's a very polarizing figure, but he has a way that he makes decisions. You may not like those ways, but he has a way that he makes those decisions. And then lastly, they really understand this whole idea that we're biased. And once you understand biases and then you stop fighting against it and you create a lot more upside than downside.
It's that simple, really, you know, in a complex manner. It's really that simple.
It really is. It's super simple. It's just not easy because we run all these races against ourselves unknowingly. Setting up, let me, if I can, give you an example. I apologize if I'm like rambling too much on this.
No, this is the point of this podcast right here.
Then I'm in the right place because rambling is one of my specialties.
Me too.
When we're recording this is March 3rd. We're not that far away from New Year's resolutions. All right. I'm not a fan of New Year's resolutions. No offense to people who are. But in January, I was talking to my employees, clients, people in my certification program, and like, hey, what are your New Year's resolution? And everybody had some version of be more disciplined or have more restraint. All right. And I go, okay, let's just pick have more restraint. What are you going to do to have more restraint? And they're like, well, I'm going to be more restrained. So you're like, that's like a circular reference or
We're
something.
We're dancing a little bit here, right?
You define the word with the word. Like this is like what a politician does. Like this is or disciplined. Like I'm going to be more disciplined by being more disciplined. It's like, okay, so we don't really actually know how to have more like discipline or restraint because we're trying to call upon the thing we're in shortage of to somehow have more of it. It's a weird kind of, again, race that we run against ourselves. And this is a concept I learned from my time in derivatives and hedging, which is, well, what if we just eliminate all the bad stuff? So what if you actually didn't need to be more disciplined? And you're like, well, how could I not need to be more disciplined? Like, because you're going to be less impulsive. So or we're going to fire all of the bad clients that drain all your energy. So at the end of the day, when have been more likely to make a really bad decision, you won't need that discipline because you're going to have more energy and you're just going to be more present. And so you'll have more mental sobriety. And so you won't need discipline. You won't have to keep telling yourself no because you'll have clarity because you're not going to be so drained at the end of the day. And so back to when I said dopamine is the molecule of more, we're so focused on, I need more discipline to be disciplined. I need more restraint to be restrained. I need to do, and it's actually the people who are truly successful and get results time and time again, They just eliminate the bad stuff first. If you eliminate all the bad stuff, all the downs, what I would call downsides, then you're only left with upside. It's just a different way of thinking, right? So, and people will call you negative, or why you always got to point these things out. Like, well, once I eliminate all the downsides, I don't have to talk about this ever again. I just have upside. You designed a system where you always have roadblocks and fires because you didn't want to talk. You just wanted to talk about all the cool stuff.
That's going to be implemented into my life immediately. I'm sitting here as you're talking, and I lost track of what I was even thinking because I was in with what you were saying there. But so right, we always think the exact opposite, and if you could reprogram your mind, you can literally accomplish anything. You can be happy under any circumstance. And, it's a choice. We choose whether we're going to do that or not. And, most of us choose not to because of the environment we find ourselves in. If you turn on the news, apparently we all hate each other. We're all trying to kill each other. And the sky is poison right now and you can't breathe. And, everything's going wrong out there. But if you don't turn the TV on, if you turn mine on, you get this beautiful logo back here, which there's nothing happier than that. So TV? Yeah, it's all about perspective. I think that's really amazing though, to just look at it from that standpoint. And I think there's a lot of people that'll see this that are probably going to say, wow, I need to do that.
Yeah. I started thinking about this more deeply when COVID happened, because right before I have a lot of these conversations with clients, we have this whole, edict about every action needs to get you closer to what you want. Your businesses exist to serve you. When I show you how to pay less in tax, it's not really about less in tax. It's about taking the money you would have paid in tax and allocating it towards the life that you want. When I show you how to recover resources from your business or your life, it's not about that. It's about taking it and redeploying it towards getting you what you want. And so I had a lot of conversations with people who are like, the thing I want more than anything in the world is more time with my kids. Cool. That's the thing to say. If you have kids, you almost can't say that. You're like, you sign something maybe on the birth certificate. It's like, you're legally required now.
This is your answer.
Whenever you're asked what you want more of, you have to say more time with your kids. Of course, we found out that was BS for a lot of folks when COVID happened and they were forced to spend more time with their kids. And they're like, let's get these kids back to school as quickly as possible. Right. And so it turned out we didn't want more time with our kids. We wanted to be more present in the time that we had with our kids, which is a different problem to solve for. Right. I need to have more energy. If I want to be more present with my kids, when I get home, I can't feel beaten down by employees and clients and feel like I got to keep doing anxiety work, checking my email over and over again and text messages, right? Totally different problem to solve than just more time, right? So want to be more present. So solving that problem becomes the sort of key, right? Rather than just more time.
Yep. That's
So then, how do we actually do that? And that's what kind of brought me back to going like, okay, yeah, we talk about more discipline, but actually we just have to eliminate the things in our way that are preventing us from getting the outcome that we want. So for me to be more present, I might be being a little redundant here, but for me to be more present at the end of the day, it's not about me working less. It's about, for me, I can only speak for me. It's about removing all the things that cause me to be inside my head when I'm at home.
Yeah. Turn off the cell phone, put it in a box somewhere and say, I'm not looking at you until tomorrow morning. And the most successful people I know do that very thing. And, unfortunately, that's something I haven't quite gotten a grasp of yet, but we'll get there eventually. I'm still one of those nervous anxiety task type people, but I'm definitely navigating myself down a path that's going to be a lot smoother and it's going to be a lot less of that, day-to-day stress and just, I
think there's a frame shift where you go from being goal-oriented to problem-oriented. So the goal put my cell phone away. Like I struggle with that, right? Put my cell phone away, right? That's the goal. But so then I could just put my cell phone away. But if the problem is I feel a bunch of anxiety about work, putting the cell phone away doesn't solve that problem. So then I have to actually be problem oriented, which is, why don't I want to put my cell phone away? What is it about that I don't feel comfortable putting it away or feel drawn to go check it? And what I found, I can only speak for myself, is the anxiety work that we tend to do day to day. It's like, keep checking the email, keep checking the text messages, the team, because we're expecting some bad news to come through. There's going to be an angry client. There's going to be something that fell apart over the course of the day, and now I'm going to be stuck having to deal with it. I don't know if you experienced that.
Oh, yes, in the roofing business is quite prevalent. Believe me, every time the phone rings, I get scared.
Right? Yeah. So now our nervous system and everything is just, we're constantly anticipating that we're going to be in triage. It's a triage mode. It's like, I can't really sit here and relax because behind the corner is like a mountain lion that's about to attack me, and I better be in position to take this thing out. Right. And so to get to a point where you can be present, part of that, I got one more thought on it. I talk about rhythms in my book, industry rhythm, business decision rhythm, personal rhythms. Industry rhythm is just stuff that we can't change. Like tax business has tax deadlines. I can't change that. So I don't fight against those. Design systems that don't fight against those rhythms. Business decision rhythms, these are things that I've done that cause all of the craziness in the business that could be changed. And then the last is personal rhythm, which is things that we're doing to ourselves that cause us to make bad decisions. Those are things I can also change. So when I'm trying to properly characterize the problem, the way I go through it is this an industry rhythm problem? Yes or no? If yes, how can I stop fighting in opposition to something I can't change? Sometimes we dig these, like roofing business, I don't know in Texas, but in a lot of places it's very seasonal, right? You got like Montana with a bunch of snow, like those guys are slow in the winter months unless you're doing repair work, right? So if I'm spending a ton of marketing dollars in the winter months, I probably dig in a deeper ditch because people aren't going to hire me till the summer anyways, right? So sometimes we are like spend so much in the off seasons that we create more strain on how much busier we now have to be in the summer to make up for how much we spent because we're fighting against an industry rhythm. So just stop doing it. And the simplest is like, just stop doing it. And then, is it a business decision? Okay, what do I do differently? Personal, I have the most control of it's personal.
Absolutely. Personal is where everything begins and it's where everything ends, and I have conversations with a lot of my friends in this industry that I'm in because it is very prominent to just, kind of feel a lot of stress at a lot of time. And, being able to just do what you just said there, that's something that a lot of my friends and I are just now starting to figure out. And I'm very grateful for it. I'll tell you what, Dan, this hour has gone by extremely fast. I know you told me that you do have a time constraint here about 15 minutes down the road. So I want to kind of speed up just a little bit and cover your book. That was the main topic we were going to discuss to begin with anyway. We just haven't even gotten to that yet. Tell me a little bit about your book. Tell me a little bit about the process that goes into writing the book and how you get that thing out to the masses and, how the book is doing.
So when I decided to write a book, I have this, and I actually write about in the book, the process that I used to determine that writing a book was even something worth doing. And so I have this thing called the 4 lenses, and will this thing that I'm doing produce revenue, reduce expenses, be a forcing function, meaning it's going to cause me to do something I plan on doing anyways, or save me time? And I need data to support these. Usually I don't have data, so then I got to do something to get data. And my rule is I got to be able to check at least 3 of the 4 of those, or I don't do it until I get more data to validate that. So with that, writing a book, oftentimes there's no guarantee that you're going to sell any books. There's all these crazy statistics on, like, most books don't sell more than 100 copies, and it's a very expensive thing to do, whether you get help from someone else or you just your time. Right? So I didn't have any data to support it was going to create revenue for me at the time. But I had all these ideas in my head that I wanted to crystallize, my principles and how to engineer luck. And so writing the book would be a forcing function. I needed to get that stuff out for my employees and business partners and stuff. So we're all kind of using the same language. It would be a forcing function, and could be a time savings later if I get this documented and now my team understands all of this. So what I ended up doing is, but I still couldn't check the third box, revenue, and there were costs, so I definitely couldn't check the box of reducing expenses. So I used one of my other principles, take a micro step. So I just posted and sent an email out, hey, if I were to write this book, would anyone be interested? No landing pages or anything like that. And I got comments. Now, I always set rules in advance because I know I'm going to be biased. And so I'm like, I need at least 20 people to say they'd buy the book for me to do anything else. So I got 20 people, and then I went, okay. I got more than 20 people, actually. So then I put up a checkout page to pre-sell the book. And I emailed all the people who said yes or posted it. And it's like, okay, it's going to be, here, I'm going to pre-sell copies, and I need at least, actually said I need at least 100 people to pre-order a copy of the book for me to proceed. And set up a checkout page, no real details, because then I'm like writing the book. If I got to give them all the details of the book, then
right, no sense in buying it.
So took that next step, got more than 100 pre-sales. Like, okay, I have validated some revenue behind this, but it's still not enough, and I don't have a publisher yet, and I don't have any of those things. And so I ended up doing this crowds, and I knew that I didn't want to put in all the time to get an agent, to get a publishing deal, and so on and so forth. And so I did this crowdsourcing for books thing called Publishizer, and I put it up there and did a campaign to see if I could generate enough sales that would get me either an agent or a book deal, just from the evidence of selling a bunch of books. And so we got started on that. And along the way, I had built a separate business called the Certainty app. And there's a bunch of details on that I'll leave out. But we were just deciding we're going to start a certification program where I was going to certify people in this methodology, this way of thinking of how to rig the game. And so simultaneous to the crowdsourcing campaign, we announced the certification program, and we're going to take 8 people. There's a $5,000 deposit, and the way that you get this deposit is you go and you buy enough copies of my book. And then if you get accepted into the program, we'll apply what you paid towards the tuition of the certification. And so what happened there is that we got 10 people who went and bought a bunch of books. That pushed the amount of book sales up to, actually set the platform record. I still have the platform record for the most number of books sold. But it created this sort of feedback cycle. This is rigging the game, by the way. This is how we engineer.
This is awesome. Yes.
And so I got a bunch of book deal offers, and ultimately got a publishing deal. But at that point, I had sold over $50,000 worth of books, copies of books. And I had sold enough copies that I basically was guaranteed that I would be a USA Today bestseller when I actually published the book. There was a whole other challenge of actually fulfilling on that and making sure that we got the rankings that we wanted. But before I had really even materially written the book, I already had enough to pay for all the work to do the book, and I'd already locked in ostensibly USA Today bestseller status. And so then that was enough for me to proceed forward. And simultaneously, because I was doing this education program where there's the education program, as I was doing those slides, it was simultaneously writing the book. Because the content that we teach in the certification is much more detailed than what's in the book. So I would do the presentations, get those presentations transcribed, get those edited, put all those together. That was like a first draft of the book. Now, I rewrote it almost entirely to have the right tone and everything, but it's much easier to edit and criticize something that's on paper than to write from a blank page. So the certification, teaching that first cohort, created all the content for the first manuscript that then 2 years later became the book. That then when it went live, we got on the USA Today list, the Wall Street Journal bestseller list, #1 in like 13 categories on Amazon, and sort of kind of went from there.
That's
And
absolutely amazing right there. And I don't mean to break in, but you're the fifth, I think, or maybe the sixth author that I've had on my podcast. And every single person has a different journey to get to that final, the final product. Yours is the most amazing one by far. Like that right there is incredible. I would never, I don't think anybody that I've spoken to previously would have that thought process to not literally be jumping into a swimming pool and hoping that there's water in before you get there, and that's awesome.
This is thinking about, well, first off, if you're going to be pretentious enough to call the book rigging the game, then you kind of have to rig the game with the book. It's like I back myself into a corner where if there are like 3 people who bought the book, you're like, really? You're someone who's like an expert in how to like analyze complex systems and engineer the outcome you want. So I kind of backed myself into a corner in some sense with that. Frankly, that's just me playing my game. Like I'm going to take the last shot. Like I want to be backed into the corner a little bit. But again, back to the biggest risk in life is not, other than death, is not getting what you want. And so anytime we spend time, money, energy, and all the different currencies on something that's not getting us closer to what we want, then we're risking not having the life that we had dreamed of. And so just going and writing a book, unless you're doing it purely for novelty, purely for joy, like this is my hobby, I want to write a book, then all of those resources are being used up in something that could have gotten you closer to the life that you actually want. And I'm not willing to do that.
There you go. That's taking a stand and that's getting it done. We're coming up really, really close on your time here. I want to make sure that everybody that's watching is able to follow you if you'd like to have any of my fans or
For sure.
I hate to say fans. That sounds really, that sounds arrogant, quite frankly. Any of my audience members here, my cult. And if anybody would like to purchase the book, what would be the best way for those things to happen?
Yeah, if you want to get the book, you can type in riggingamazon.com and it will take you to my Amazon checkout page. I secretly, actually not so secretly, want to sell enough books that Amazon sends me a cease and desist letter for owning riggingamazon.com.
Let's do it.
So if you guys want to help me piss off Amazon,
we're
so
in.
riggingamazon.com. That'll take you to the Amazon checkout page. Otherwise, I have a bunch of resources and things on certaintytools.com, and that'll give you links to the book and my social media stuff and all that. If you like my style on social media, I'm playing my game over there. I have Dan versus social media on Instagram, and it's where I post I bought a year's worth of cliche social media posts in this package, and then I post those, and then I have it blow up, and then I give my version of it that's not like painfully cliche. So
I love it. I'm going to get involved with all of this stuff. Dan, we just met literally an hour and 15 minutes ago, and this has been a captivating conversation. I really enjoyed this tremendously. I hope at some point in the future we could maybe do this again. Now that I've had an opportunity to really understand what is going on, that we could, I can formulate some questions and maybe have a little more depth to the conversation. But I thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate it. I do want to end with one quick question, if I can. Seattle sports. Tell me about it. What's your favorite team that you've ever had? It's got to be the Sonics, obviously, right? I mean,
when you said Seattle sports, I was really already clinched up for you to say, why didn't you run the ball in the Super Bowl? Like, I was already ready for that. Seahawks.
No way.
So respect. I'm an even bigger fan for you not asking that question. Yeah, Sonics. I'm still bitter. I boycotted Starbucks for a long time since Howard Schultz, Starbucks CEO, sold the Sonics. Yeah, super bitter about that. Ready for another team.
Absolutely. Well, you guys have an XFL team over there too. We actually got one here in San Antonio. So this is the first time I've had a team that I can say since I've been in San Antonio, it's my home team, and I've been here since the beginning. So maybe we'll play each other in the XFL Bowl, and we can meet up somewhere and have a drink and say, there you go. Here's the sport. So Dan, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I'm going to release this in a couple weeks. I'll get a hold of you, and I'll clip it up a little bit, and I can send you over any of this that you'd like as well. And you're free to use it how you see fit. So Dan Nicholson, thank you very much. And to everybody, we will see you on the next episode of Keeping It Real.